Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to today's broadcast of the Tuesday, July 28th edition of the Cape Cod Times. This is Doug Fagan, your volunteer reader, coming to you today, as always, from the studios of the Audible Local Ledger here in Deer Crossing area of Mashpee, Massachusetts. Looking at the calendar and saying July 28th, again, I ask, where has July gone? I mean, it seems just like the other day we were waiting for Memorial Day. That came and went. Then all of a sudden June was gone. Now July is almost gone, and we're heading into the latter part of the summer with August just around the corner. I think as we get older and age, the time seems to go by ever more quickly. Well, that aside, let's take a look at the weather, not only for today, but throughout the rest of the week. And according to what I've heard, like on the television and what have you, other news media outlets, looks like we're going to be in for a rough day tomorrow. But before we get to that, we're going to have 75 degrees today, mostly sunny. It has turned a bit humid already, and there may be a thunderstorm around in various places this afternoon. Tonight, here comes the rain. Thunderstorms late tonight, remaining cloudy and humid. An overnight low of 65 degrees, and the rain does start tonight. Tomorrow, high of 71, rain, a thunderstorm, and enough rain that we need to watch for flooding in some areas. There's supposed to be some significant rain coming in tomorrow. Thursday, we have some sunny intervals with a few showers around. Most of the rain starts to head out on Thursday morning at the latest. A few showers and a bit humid still on Thursday. Friday and Saturday, back to full sunshine. Mostly sunny and humid both days. A high Friday of 80 and Saturday 81. So the day to avoid if you have to go out and about with errands would be tomorrow and maybe Thursday morning. But today, Thursday afternoon, Friday and Saturday, you should be good to go just about anywhere in nice weather. Looking around the Cape at some of the temperatures, the highs that is, for the South Shore and the Cape and Islands, let's take a look at Plymouth, where we have 80 degrees as a high today, Buzzards Bay, 76, and Wareham, 79. Crossing the canal into Sandwich Bourne area, 77 there, 78 at Falmouth, 77 Mashpee, 78 at Barnstable. Hyannis has a high of 75 today, Dennis 76, Chatham 75. Pretty consistent all the way around, as you can see, and is typical. Brewster, as we head north, 75 degrees, Eastham 77, Truro 78, and out at the tip of Cape Cod at Race Point Light, we have 79 as a high at Provincetown today. What about the islands, you say? Well, taking a look at Martha's Vineyard out at Edgartown, we have a high of 74, Oak Bluffs 75. Moving on out to Nantucket Village, we have 72 at Secaucet and 75 at Nantucket Village. Water temperatures today pretty good. Cape Cod Bay, 68 degrees, wave heights 1 to 3 feet, wind direction south-southeast at 8 to 16 knots. Water temperature, as you might expect in Nantucket Sound, is a bit warmer at 74 degrees. Very good. Wave heights 2 to 4 feet, wind direction south at 8 to 16 knots. All right, friends, there you have it. Typically a fairly nice day here on the Cape today, but turning sour tonight, and again, look for maybe a complete rain out tomorrow. Then Thursday, a little bit in the morning. Friday and Saturday look great. All right, friends, let's move on now to page 1 of today's Cape Cod Times and see what articles of local, regional, state interest we have there, or anywhere in the paper for that matter, before we move on to articles of national and international interest. Well, here on page 1, it must be a slow news day because probably 2/3 of the front page is taken up by pictures, pretty nice pictures, but I'll tell you what it says under the first one. There's a picture of the Highland Lighthouse, and it says underneath the picture that the Highland Lighthouse, as a backdrop, Golfers play through July 25th on the Highland Links Golf Course in North Truro. Highland Lighthouse and the Keeper's House were moved back from the eroding bluff 30 years ago this month. The lighthouse was moved 450 feet inland, and its new location was 570 feet from the edge of the bluff. The lighthouse move took about 18 days. International Chimney Company of Buffalo, New York, moved the lighthouse, and the move cost $1.55 million way back then. The Coast Guard operates the lighthouse as an active navigational aid. It is located within the Cape Cod National Seashore and is surrounded by a 9-hole links-style golf course. The lighthouse is open daily for tours. So there you have it, a little bit of information in reference to the Highland Lighthouse, which was moved 30 years ago this month, and it cost at that particular time $1.55 million. Imagine what it would cost nowadays. The one article here on page 1 that does have a local reference for us, at least a statewide reference, is this headline. It says, Massachusetts seeks to prevent wrong-way driving. A new law culminates years of work. This is a USA Today Network article from New England, written by Margie Cullen. Here is the article. In May, State Trooper Kevin Trainer was killed by a wrong-way driver on Route 1 in Linfield. He was just one victim in a growing number of fatal wrong-way crashes in Massachusetts, that according to data from the AAA Foundation for Traffic Safety. Now, a new law seeks to prevent more of these accidents from happening in the future. On July 9, Governor Maura Healey signed into law wrong-way driving legislation as part of the fiscal year 2027 budget. Originally an amendment filed by Senator Bruce Tarr, a Republican from Gloucester, the legislation establishes a wrong-way driving prevention strategy, and it implements roadway safety improvements and identifies high-risk locations. It's the culmination of a year of work Tarr has been doing since Endicott College, Police Department Sergeant Jeremy Cole, and 18-year-old Christopher Daly died in a wrong-way driving collision in 2024 and 2025, respectively, that according to a press release from Representative Tarr's office. The death of Christopher Daly, Sergeant Jeremy Cole, Trooper Kevin Trainer, and every life lost to wrong-way driving represent heartbreaking tragedies for their families, friends, and communities, Tarr said in a statement on July 23rd. The best way we can honor their memory and to protect everyone who travels on our roadways is by doing everything possible to prevent these crashes before they happen. So, here's what to know. How will the new law prevent, or hope to prevent, wrong-way driving? Well, the new law seeks to prevent wrong-way driving through safety improvements, educational campaigns, and new and advancing technology. Here are some of the steps it takes. It establishes a data-driven wrong-way driving prevention strategy for all limited access roadways or highways with limited entry and exit points. It implements roadway safety improvements, including directional striping on highway ramps, enhanced signage, improved roadway lighting, and real-time wrong-way driver detection systems. It incorporates wrong-way driving prevention education into driver training programs for young people. It requires annual wrong-way driving public awareness campaigns through the Registry of Motor Vehicles. It mandates wrong-way driving instruction in law enforcement officer training. And it directs a feasibility study on improving roadway safety for drivers over 70. The plan requires that implementation prioritize high-risk locations, which are determined based on data on wrong-way driving incidents and roadway deficiencies. It also calls for annual reporting to the legislature on implementation progress, costs, and effectiveness. Every life lost to a wrong-way driver is a heartbreaking tragedy. That reminds us why we must do everything we can to make our roads safer, Governor Healy said in a statement. Together, we're taking meaningful action to save lives and prevent families from experiencing these heartbreaking losses. All right, there you have it. Implementation of legislation to hopefully reduce the number of wrong-way driving accidents and tragedies that has come into law here in Massachusetts. Well, moving on to page 2, friends, we have more reference to traffic and accidents, and this headline says, according to the police, SUV ran a red light before the Bourne rollover crash. This is by Mary Ann Bragg of the Cape Cod Times Network, and there's a picture of 2 cars badly damaged after an accident. Underneath the picture, it says this: a 2-car crash at Herring Pond Road and the Scenic Highway in Bourne sent 1 driver to a trauma center on July 26. 2 others were taken to hospitals as well. Here's the article about that particular accident. A Providence, Rhode Island man suffered possible life-threatening injuries Sunday when he drove his eastbound SUV through an intersection on Scenic Highway in Bourne and T-boned a Jeep Wrangler turning left, that according to the Bourne Police Department. The force of the crash at 6:48 a.m. caused the Jeep to lift into the air, roll over once, and come to rest on its wheels, the police said. The Jeep driver was driving west and turning into the Herring Pond Recreation Area alongside the Cape Cod Canal. The driver of the SUV, which was a GMC Terrain model, is alleged to have not stopped for a red light based on an initial investigation by the Bourne Police Department. That, according to a department statement from the police. The narrow 4-lane highway, also known as Route 6, is a heavily used corridor between the Bourne and Sagamore bridges. West of Sunday's crash, work has begun on the road to install a raised concrete center median to improve safety on a nearly 1.5 mile section. Other safety measures are planned as well, that according to the State Department of Transportation. On Sunday, officers applied a tourniquet to the SUV driver's right upper arm to control arterial bleeding, according to the police department statement. A medical helicopter flew him to a trauma center. His 44-year-old passenger, a Brockton man, was taken by ambulance to a hospital with serious but not life-threatening injuries. The driver of the Jeep that was struck, a 61-year-old man from New York, was taken to a different hospital with what appeared to be injuries not considered to be life-threatening. In October of last year, a Carver man died in a 3-car crash on the highway west of Herring Pond Road in this general area. That according to various police reports. All right, that includes that article and that picture, and the resulting injuries indicate a very serious crash. Here's an article about an unusual situation. It says, firefighters pluck skydiver from a Marston's Mills tree. This is of the Cape Cod Times Network as well. Here's the article. Firefighters on Friday night took on a new role as tree surgeons to rescue a skydiver who was entangled in a tree at Cape Cod Airfield on Race Lane in Marston's Mills, according to a post on the Facebook page of the Centerville, Osterville, Marston's Mills Fire and Rescue Department. Firefighters who received the call about 6:30 p.m. determined that the skydiver was suspended approximately 30 feet above the ground. A second person who had climbed the tree in an attempt to help that skydiver ended up out on a limb. Firefighters from Ladder 1 called the department's aerial ladder into action and used chainsaws to safely remove branches, allowing them to reach both people. Both the skydiver and the Good Samaritan were safely brought to the ground. No additional hazards were identified, and crews secured the scene before returning to service. The department has issued no further details about the incident. Well, I guess if you're skydiving, it's not the place to end up in a tree, that's for sure. Or in the shark-infested waters. Ooh. Well, don't you know, speaking of sharks, we turn now to page 3, the Cape and Islands page, where we typically have some local articles of interest. And this headline says, Cape Cod Bay's basking sharks are part of Shark Week. This is by Heather McCarron of the Cape Cod Times staff. There's a picture here just under that headline, and below the picture it says, wildlife expert and biologist Forrest Galante steps off the Marilyn J. boat after spending the day searching for basking sharks in Cape Cod Bay on May 29th. Galante was on Cape Cod looking for basking sharks for an upcoming episode of the Discovery Channel Shark Week, which is happening right now on television. Galante and his crew returned to Barnstable Marine Services dock after more than 12 hours in Cape Cod Bay. Here's the article. 2 months after racing an approaching storm to find giant sharks in Cape Cod Bay, wildlife biologist and television host Forrest Galante is bringing the adventure to Discovery's Shark Week. This time, however, the stars aren't great white sharks, but rather basking sharks. Galante's new special, called Alien Sharks Untamed America, will air July 29th at 10 p.m. on the Discovery Channel, giving viewers their first look at footage captured during the production team's May visit to Cape Cod. The episode is part of Discovery Channel's Shark Week, a week-long television event now in its 38th year, which features shark-related documentaries, field expeditions, and marine wildlife stories from around the world. So this particular episode on the basking sharks will air on the Discovery Channel tomorrow for those of us here in this area. The program will also be available for reviewing on the Discovery Plus channel the same day, the 29th of July, and can be streamed on HBO Max following Shark Week. The Cape Cod segment follows Galante's search for basking sharks, one of the region's most distinctive and elusive marine species, and the second largest fish in the world after the whale shark. Galante traveled to Cape Cod Bay on May 29th as part of a nationwide filming project focused on unusual shark and ray species found in American waters as part of the nation's 250th anniversary observations. The crew faced a narrow weather window and had just 1 day to locate the giant fish before conditions deteriorated. Departing from Barnstable Harbor before sunrise, the team spent hours searching the bay by boat with assistance from an aerial spotter plane to help find the sharks from above. At the time, Galante described the basking shark as probably the coolest shark in the entire continental United States. The effort was ultimately successful. Galante and members of his crew encountered basking sharks in the water and captured footage that will now be unveiled during the Shark Week special tomorrow. That's July 29. Reflecting on the experience during his Cape Cod visit, Galante said the encounter ranked among his favorite shark dives anywhere in the world. I've had the good fortune of diving with dozens and dozens of species of shark, and getting to do basking sharks in Cape Cod Bay was one of my very favorites, he said. Unlike Atlantic white sharks, which hunt seals and fish around Cape Cod, the basking sharks are filter feeders that consume plankton and other tiny organisms. Despite their gentle nature, their large size and prominent dorsal fins sometimes lead them to be mistaken for great white sharks. The Cape Cod footage is one stop in Alien Sharks Untamed America, which takes Galante to several marine regions of the country in search of shark and ray species. The special showcases species that are often receiving less attention than their more famous relatives, while highlighting the diversity of sharks around and in U.S. marine ecosystems. For local viewers, the episode offers a chance to see Cape Cod Bay featured during Shark Week and to watch the outcome of a high-stakes search for one of the bay's most remarkable seasonal visitors. All right, friends, that will be airing tomorrow, July 29th, on Discovery Channel's Shark Week. The research and the filming done by Mr. Galante on the basking sharks in particular. Here on the Islands and Cape and Islands page is another article of local interest. It says authorities seek public help in 2025 fatal Wellfleet hit and run. This is by the Cape Cod Times Network staff. Here's the article. Cape Cod law enforcement authorities are seeking the public's help in solving the hit-and-run death of an Army veteran on Ocean View Drive in Wellfleet last May of 2025. On Friday, Cape and Islands District Attorney Robert Galliboy and Wellfleet Chief Kevin LaRocco issued a plea for help in the investigation of the death of Timothy Charles Duvall Jr. last May 24th. Duvall Jr. was found lying on Ocean View Drive near Long Pond Road before midnight on May 24. The 24-year-old Army veteran and father of a 3-year-old son was pronounced dead at the scene. In a May 2025 interview with the Cape Cod Times, the man's father, Duvall Sr. of Delaware, admitted that toxicology reports showed his son's alcohol levels were very high. His son of Tallahassee, Florida, was partying that Memorial Day weekend in Wellfleet with friends. When they went to the Beachcomber at Cahoon Hollow Beach, he said his son was refused entry. His friends went inside. Duvall Sr. said his son spent time in the Beachcomber's parking lot before eventually making his way up the driveway to Ocean View Drive and toward Long Pond Road, where his body was found. In Friday's press release, the district attorney's office describes the lengths to which law enforcement has gone to solve the case. This has and continues to be a joint investigation with the Wellfleet Police Department into the death of Timothy Duvall Jr., the release says. This investigation began the night of the incident and continues to date. A dozen witnesses have been interviewed, both by law enforcement investigators and the grand jury. Multiple vehicles have been examined and search warrants granted by the court were executed. At this time, if anyone has information, please contact the Wellfleet Police Department and Detective Jack Posca, that's P-O-S-K-A, at 508-349-2100. District Attorney Galliboy and Chief LaRocco are hoping to bring closure to this investigation and to provide answers to Timothy Duvall Jr.'s family and the community. So again, if you have information about Timothy Duvall Jr.'s death, please contact the Wellfleet Police Department and specifically ask for Detective Jack Posca, P-O-S-K-A, at 508-349-2100. Turning now to sports, the next article here says, meet the Cape Cod Times all-scholastic teams, and it specifically mentions girls lacrosse. It mentions the girls' names and gives a brief bio of each of the kids mentioned. I won't go into the bios, but I think certainly their names are worth mentioning, as well as the introduction to the article, which is this. It says the 2026 Sandwich High girls lacrosse team might go down as arguably the best Cape and Islands girls lacrosse team of all time. What that group accomplished is going to be hard to top. A Division IV state championship, a 15-3 regular season record against the toughest schedule in division, a 20-3 mark overall, Cape and Islands League Atlantic Division championship, and an 11-0 record against regional opponents by a 204 to 33 point margin. Dominant, That's why Sandwich landed 7 selections on the Cape Cod Times Girls Lacrosse All-Scholastic First Team, including Atlantic Division Most Valuable Player sophomore Quinn Anderson and a host of other worthy candidates. Beyond the confines of Sandwich Middle and High School, there was still ample talent on display on lacrosse fields across the Cape and Islands. Those players helped 11 other teams qualify for the postseason, while none of those went further than Nantucket's Elite Eight run. Despite several outgoing seniors, and it names who they are, the region is a good place to be equally competitive next season. From super seniors to breakout freshmen and goal scorers to lockdown defensemen and beyond, meet the 2026 Cape Cod Times Girls Lacrosse All-Scholastic Team. First team, Emily Johnson of Barnstable, Jenna Richard, or Ricard, R-I-C-H-A-R-D, of Dennis Yarmouth, Kinley Mohan, M-O-H-A-N, of Falmouth, Shayla Carson of Alex Royal of Martha's Vineyard, Sierra Hendricks of Mashpee, Sophia Morin, M-O-R-I-N, also of Mashpee, Tessa Grodziski, Monomoy, Louisa Benny, B-E-N-I, of Nantucket, Maya Johnson, also of Nantucket, Julia Kipperman, Nauset, Quinn Anderson of Sandwich, Kyla Darman, D-A-R-M-O-N, Sandwich, Bella Di Giacomo, Sandwich, Nora Katzenbach, Sandwich, Ashlyn Kruger, Sandwich, Paige Morrison, Sandwich, Elizabeth Stutzman, Sandwich. Well, you can certainly see how Sandwich, with their great team and great record, dominated the first team selections for the Cape Cod Times girls lacrosse team. The second team was made up of various members as well, starting with Avery Cruteau of Barnstable, Morgan Mueller, also of Barnstable, Taylor Simard, Bourne, Brooke Smith, Cape Tech, Ariano Corso, Dennis Yarmouth, Kaylin Forrest, F-O-R-Y-S, Falmouth, Addie Romberger, Falmouth, Carolyn Kazalt, Falmouth Academy, Faye McGuire, Falmouth Academy, Claire Howard, Mashpee, Dylan Damien, Nantucket, Ella Douglas, Nantucket, Sophia Philbrick, St. John Paul II, Akira Umbrello, St. John Paul II, Bridget Dwyer, Sturgis West, Cecilia Connor, Sturgis West, Macy Pena, Upper Cape, and those are the second team selections. So there you have it, the first and second team selections of the Cape Cod Times All-Star girls lacrosse team from this past season, dominated by 7 selections to the first team by the tremendous team from Sandwich High School. Staying with sports, take a look at the Cape Cod Baseball League, which is coming to an end, unfortunately, here pretty soon. It says the Orleans Firebirds keep the playoff hopes alive. This is by Alan Gunn of the Cape Cod Times Network. Here's the article. The Orleans Firebirds, with a strange record of 11 wins and 23 losses, are mathematically still in the hunt for the final East Division playoff spot in the Cape Cod Baseball League, with 6 games remaining on its schedule, should the Chatham Anglers slip up and give Orleans a chance to slide in. Orleans overcame a run of back-to-back defeats to upend the Cotuit Kettleers, 11 and 21, and 2 is their record, which is fighting for its own playoff life. Dominic Cadiz continued his strong summer for Orleans, going 3 for 5 with 1 RBI, while Tyler Myatt of Tennessee and Casey Comiskey of Southern New Hampshire both went 2 for 5 with RBIs. Adam Magchpak of San Diego State was 0 for 2 but drew 2 walks and scored twice. Andrew Cutler from George Washington made a sterling start on the bump as he gave up just 2 hits and 1 walk while striking out 8 across 5 innings. In other Cape Cod action, Brewster beat Bourne 4-1 in 7 innings, and Brewster is now 24 wins, 8 losses, and 3 ties. Has won 5 games in a row after it beat Bourne in a game shortened due to darkness. So if you have not had a chance to get out to one of the various Cape Cod Diamonds so far this year, you've only got a week and a half to do so. And it's certainly worth the effort to support the Cape Cod Baseball League and these outstanding college players. Well, friends, we're at the halfway point of today's broadcast, and it's today, as every day, we typically, at this point in the broadcast, look at the obituaries, and we do have a couple today. The first one is of Nikki, Nikki Barros, Bairos. It has a dateline of Denellen, which I believe is, yes, Florida. Here it is. Nikki Karen Barros, née Nacopoulos, age 65, of Denellen, Florida, passed away after a short and courageous battle with cancer. She passed away on July 22nd. She was the beloved daughter of Anne and Arthur Nicolopoulos, and her loss leaves a deep ache in the heart of all who knew and loved her. Nikki spent most of her life living on Cape Cod, where she made her house a home to anyone who needed a safe place, and she then moved to Denellen, Florida, with her husband Tom in 2015. Nikki lived life with a big, loving personality that was impossible to miss and even harder to forget. She had a gift for bringing joy into ordinary moments, whether through her bright pink lipstick, her infectious laugh, or the way she lit up whenever she was surrounded by her family and friends. She loved sunbathing on summer days, a good glass of wine, food from her native New England, and doting on her dogs and celebrating the people she cherished most, those being her daughters and grandchildren. Nikki's life was defined by warmth, humor, and devotion to the people she loved. Her memory lives in the countless memories she leaves behind, sunlit afternoons, laughter-filled gatherings, and the unmistakable brightness she brought into the world. She'll be deeply missed and forever remembered. For those who wish to attend, services will be held at Roberts Funeral Home in Denellen, Florida, on Friday, July 31st. That, friends, was the obituary of Miss Nikki Barros, Bairos, now of Denellen, Florida. Our second obituary today is that of Bernadine C. Strom, Strom, and has a dateline of Shrewsbury. Bernadine née Rourke Strom, 86, of Shrewsbury in South Yarmouth, died Wednesday, July 22nd, at her home. She was the loving wife of the late George A. Strom, Jr. for 44 years prior to his passing in 2008. Bernadine leaves 2 daughters, Martha Strom of Shrewsbury and Jane Corrier and her husband of Clarksville, Maryland. Bernadine was born and raised on Vernon Hill in Worcester, daughter of William J. and Helen Conlin Rourke, and has lived in Shrewsbury for 54 years. She enjoyed her time on Cape Cod, especially days spent at Corporation Beach with family and friends. She was a graduate of the former Ascension High School in Worcester, class of 1957, and Worcester State Teachers College, class of 1961. She enjoyed staying in touch with her classmates and also planned reunions for both of her alma maters at her home. She began her career as a longtime educator and absolutely loved being a teacher. She began her career at Helen Mixter School in West Boylston, followed by Wildwood School in Burlington. And she taught defensive driving at the National Safety Council. She joined the faculty at Burncoat Street Preparatory School in Worcester in 1985 and joyfully taught there through her retirement in 2000. After retiring, Bernardine was a tutor for the Worcester Public Schools at Norback Avenue School and Gates Lane School. Additionally, she supervised student teachers for Cambridge College. Calling hours are Thursday, July 30th, from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Athy, that's A-T-H-Y, Memorial Home, 111 Lancaster Street in Worcester. The funeral mass will be held on Friday, July 31st at 11 a.m. in St. Mary's Church on Main Street in Shrewsbury, with burial to follow in the Mountain View Cemetery there at Shrewsbury. All right, friends, that was the obituary of Bernardine C. Strom of Shrewsbury. Moving on now with articles of national and international interest, we return to page 1, where this headline says, Iran appears to test the latest U.S. pause in fighting. And there is a picture underneath that headline showing vessels in the Strait of Hormuz near the beach of Bandar Abbas, Iran, on July 27th. Iran has indicated it was still in control of the strait. This is a Reuters news agency article with a dateline of Dubai. Here's the article. Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Iraq reported drone attacks on July 27, 2 days after the United States abruptly suspended a 2-week bombing campaign of airstrikes against Iran, as Tehran appeared to put President Donald Trump's latest strategic U-turn to the test. Saudi Arabia said it shot down drones aimed at petroleum targets, some in its eastern provinces and others in the capital, Riyadh. It said the drones had been launched from Iraq by Iranian-backed militia, and it reserved the right to respond. Separately, Iran's Houthi allies in Yemen said they had targeted transit sites carrying oil to Saudi Arabia, a main Red Sea oil port of Yanbu, in retaliation for what it said were Saudi drone incursions into Yemeni airspace. Earlier, Jordan reported shooting down 2 drones, and Iraqi security sources reported a series of drone attacks on camps housing Iranian opposition Kurdish forces in northern Iraq. Officials did not identify the source of those particular drones. Jordan and northern Iraq were the locations where 4 U.S. service members were killed during the 2-week air campaign, which Trump suspended abruptly over the weekend after his top brass advised him that the strategy had run its course. Iran has said it will pause its own attacks for as long as Trump's self-imposed ceasefire continues, but it also said it was still in control of the contested Strait of Hormuz and was not seeking to resume peace talks with the United States. In his latest strategic reversal over the weekend, which came with no prior announcement, Trump halted a campaign of 13 successive nights of intensified bombing that had provoked Tehran to fire on U.S. bases in response. The end of the U.S. campaign sent oil prices tumbling. Brent crude, which had recently ticked above $100 a barrel for the first time since May, fell to around 6.5% on July 27 to just over $90 a barrel, having touched levels as low as $87.55. Trump's decision to suspend the campaign reflected advice from his military that the bombing had reached the limits of what it could achieve, according to U.S. official and several U.S. media reports. The U.S. official told Reuters news agency that military commanders had advised the president they were running out of targets. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, had expressed concern over the depletion of air defense munitions, so said various officials. So Netanyahu of Israel says Iran's top agenda is the top agenda in his meeting with Trump. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu departed to Washington on July 27th, where he said he would meet Trump on July 28th for their first face-to-face talks since the start of their conflict with Iran. It will be Netanyahu's eighth meeting with Trump since the U.S. president returned to office, and their first since February, right before Israel and the United States launched a joint aerial campaign against Iran. In these complex times, you need to act with both great determination and great wisdom. We will discuss all the issues on the agenda, primarily Iran. Of course, our goal is to protect our security, said Netanyahu, and to expand the circle of peace around us. This he said in a video statement upon his departure from Israel. Israel had not taken part in the 2-week U.S. bombing campaign. Netanyahu said in recent weeks he acknowledged that he and Trump have had some differences as Israel and U.S. interest in the region appeared to diverge. So Iran makes a request for more talks, not in our DNA, so they say. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, said on July 26 that Trump had paused the bombing campaign to allow room for negotiations. Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other U.S. officials have described Iran as, quote, begging for a deal, end quote. However, this does not seem to be reality. But the spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry, Esmail Baghai, said in a televised press conference on July 27 that Iran had not asked to resume peace talks with the United States. Messages were still being passed between the sides through mediators, and Iran had not forsaken diplomacy, but reports about Iran requesting negotiations with the U.S. are fabricated, the Iranian representative said. This is not in our DNA. Tehran also indicated it was still in control of the Strait of Hormuz. Several Iranian state media outlets cited an informed source as saying that Iran had turned around 6 offending ships on July 27th that had attempted to cross the strait without its permission. One of the vessels, the source said, had, quote, an accident, end quote. As previously announced, the traffic route in the Strait of Hormuz is the route specified by Iran, and other routes are contaminated and have no way out, the Iranian state media reports quoted the source as saying. Trump launched his renewed bombing campaign to punish Iran after Tehran fired on ships using a route through the strait that has been promoted by the United States, which has told vessels to sail close to the coast of Oman. Iran says ships may pass only through a channel that runs closer to its own coast, which it controls and where it intends to impose transit fees. The 2 weeks of renewed U.S. bombing killed scores of people in Iran and destroyed bridges and tunnels across the south as well as military targets. 4 U.S. service members were killed by Iran's return fire against U.S. bases in neighboring Arab states. Iran also struck civilian infrastructure in Gulf countries in what it said was retaliation for U.S. strikes on civilian targets in Iran. Iran's Houthi allies recently threatened to extend the disruption to global oil supplies in a second major waterway by announcing a blockade of Saudi Arabia's oil industry in the Red Sea. The halt to the renewed U.S. bombing campaign leaves no clear indication of what leverage Washington can exert to achieve Trump's aim to break Iran's grip on the strait. Washington and Tehran reached an agreement in June on a framework for talks meant to take place by the end of August to resolve major issues, such as Iran's nuclear program. But the sides have disputed the meaning of the Memorandum of Understanding's language about the Strait of Hormuz, with Washington insisting it requires Tehran to allow free travel, while Iran says it grants the authority to supervise transit within the strait. All right, there you have it. That's the end of that article. A continuing stalemate in the Iran war, with the Strait of Hormuz still remaining essentially closed. And the beat goes on. Well, friends, as you may know, there was a significant disruption in Seattle this past weekend at the Bite of Seattle Fest, which with various tasting and restaurant organizations present this fest, which is a big deal in Seattle. And there was a shooting there. And this next headline addresses that. It says another suspect sought after the Seattle shooting. And this is a USA Today article. Here it is. Authorities were searching for a second suspect who they believed opened fire at a food festival in Seattle, killing 3 people and injuring 4 others. Police said the gunfire erupted when at least 2 people, and maybe 3, began firing at one another on July 26th at the Bite of Seattle Festival, a 3-day event at the Seattle Center, an outdoor park home to the Space Needle. Authorities took one suspect into custody, while another fled the area and was being sought by police, said Assistant Seattle Police Chief Tyrone Davis. He added that there may be more suspects involved and urged witnesses to come forward with information or cell phone footage. We're still trying to figure this out, Davis said. We know that there were people out there when this incident occurred that saw what happened and know some of the people that might be involved. Police said the shooting took place at about 6 p.m. Pacific time, and despite life-saving efforts, 2 people were pronounced dead at the scene. Emergency responders took 4 other people to nearby hospitals. 1 woman later died from her injuries. The others, including a 2-year-old boy, were listed in stable condition, and most have been released from the hospital. Officials said a woman with minor injuries refused to be taken to a hospital. Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson described the incident as an act of horrific violence. Impacted families are living through the worst moment of their lives, and an entire community is trying to understand how a gathering built around culture, connection, and joy ended up in gunfire, she said. Founded in 1982, the Bite of Seattle has been a summer tradition in the Northwest for over 40 years, and it features over 130 food and beverage vendors, along with 5 cooking demonstrations, live music, and other activities. The fatal victims included 2 men, ages 19 and 44, and a 56-year-old woman, according to a statement from the Seattle Police. The agency did not publicly identify those killed in the shooting. The 2 men died at the scene despite life-saving measures. The woman died at Harborview Medical Center, the region's top-level trauma center, where she and multiple other people were rushed after the shooting. As of July 27, only the 2-year-old toddler, remained hospitalized at Harborview Medical Center, said Susan Gregg, a spokesman for the University of Washington School of Medicine, which operates the hospital. The boy was listed in satisfactory condition, she added. A 23-year-old man and a 39-year-old woman were discharged from Harborview Medical Center, Gregg said. At the University of Washington Medical Center Montlake, medical staff discharged a 27-year-old man as well. Davis said authorities recovered 2 firearms at the scene. He said there's no outstanding threat to the community at this time. Davis said police have a limited number of witnesses and urged more to come forth to speak with law enforcement. He also said there were no surveillance cameras in the area, but encouraged those who may have cell phone footage video to come forth to the police department. There are witnesses, they're just not coming forward, he said. We need people to be brave, to reach out to us, and you can do so anonymously. All right, there you have it, the terrible tragedy in the public festival shooting in Seattle this past weekend. Well, this next article addresses an interesting topic of national interest, and that is the voting by mail option. The headline here says, Supreme Court asked to allow ballot restrictions. The Department of Justice wants to halt the ruling blocking Trump order. This is a Reuters news agency article, and here it is. President Donald Trump's administration asked the U.S. Supreme Court on July 27 to allow implementation nationwide of his executive order aimed at tightening rules for mail-in voting ahead of the November 3rd midterm elections that will decide control of Congress. In a filing, the Justice Department requested that the justices of the Supreme Court put a hold on a judge's ruling preventing the enforcement of the Republican president's directive in 23 mostly Democratic governed states and Washington, D.C., which had challenged the order as unconstitutional while the litigation plays out. The Supreme Court ordered those states to respond to the Justice Department's request by August the 3rd. U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani rejected the administration's argument that the states lacked the necessary legal standing to challenge Trump's directive. In June, Talwani ruled that the president lacked the authority to order changes in how states administer federal elections, noting that under the U.S. Constitution, states have the role of determining voter eligibility requirements. The administration said that justices should lift Talwani's ruling because the lawsuit is premature. Federal agencies are still deliberating over how, if at all, to implement the order, yet the district court preemptively decided that whatever the agencies may choose to do will necessarily be unlawful, the Justice Department said in its filing. Trump's executive order, issued in March as part of his wider efforts to make changes to elections. Trump, who has made false claims of widespread voting fraud, including in his 2020 loss to Democrat Joe Biden, had pressed Republican-controlled Congress to pass a contentious package of voting restrictions called the Save America Act. Trump has vowed to end the use of mail-in ballots nationwide, even though he has voted by mail in the past. He has made this motion before the midterms and has long cast doubt on the security of such ballots, although evidence of voter fraud is rare indeed. Restricting mail-in ballots would stand to disproportionately benefit Republicans, given that Democratic voters traditionally have been more likely to use mail-in voting ballots than Republican voters. Trump's executive order directed the Department of Homeland Security to compile and transmit to the states a list of U.S. citizens eligible to vote in each state, and the Justice Department to prioritize investigating and prosecuting state and local election officials who issue ballots to people deemed not eligible to vote in federal elections. It also required the U.S. Postal Service to deliver ballots only to voters on each state's approved mail-in ballot list. The Postal Service recently moved to implement Trump's directive. States, including California and Massachusetts, sued in federal court in Boston to challenge Trump's order. A group of 12 Republican state attorneys general intervened in the case to defend Trump's directive. Talwani, that's the judge, found that the claims made by the challenging states were not premature, as the administration had argued, and that they had legal standing to sue over Trump's directive because they would face election administration disruption, compliance cost, and a credible threat of criminal prosecution. The judge also noted that federal agencies lack the ability to compile accurate citizen lists for each state. The Justice Department asked the Boston-based First U.S. Citizens Circuit Court of Appeals to put Talwani's ruling on hold based on the administration's view that the challengers lack standing to sue. The First Circuit rejected the request on July 25. In June, the Supreme Court rejected a Republican-backed challenge to state laws that allow mail-in ballots received after Election Day to be counted. All right, the Supreme Court yet to possibly hear and vote on this presidential directive to try to cancel voting by mail. Time will tell how that works out. Now, returning to sports for a few moments, let's take a look at the standings in Major League Baseball, especially for your beloved Boston Red Sox, who've been on a real hot streak lately. In the American League East, in which the Red Sox reside, of course, they now, after this winning streak, have a record of 55 wins and 50 losses, and are now 7 games behind the Tampa Bay Rays, who lead the division by 2.5 games over the Yankees. which means the Sox are 4.5 games behind the Yankees. In the Central Division, the White Sox have overtaken the mighty Cleveland team, and they lead that division by 2 games over the Cleveland Guardians. Hard to say Guardians versus Indians. In the West Division, Texas, with almost a 500 record, 54-52, lead that division by 2.5 games over both Seattle and Houston. In the National League, the Atlanta Braves lead the Eastern Division over the Phillies by 5.5 games. Central Division finds Milwaukee atop that division 6 games ahead of the Cubbies of Chicago. And in the West Division, yeah, you guessed it, the LA Dodgers are again running away with that division. They now lead second place Arizona by 12.5 games. So it looks like the Dodgers are in for sure. In golf, taking a quick look at the leading money winners throughout the season, Scottie Scheffler leads the group of professional golfers, having won $15,900,000 so far. Cameron Young is second, Matt Fitzpatrick third, Wyndham Clark fourth, Colin Morikawa fifth, Rory McIlroy sixth, Chris Gautino 7, Sam Burns 8, Jacob Bridgman 9, and Siwoo Kim 10. Those are the leading money winners in golf for this season. And as most of you know or have heard, the training camps for the various professional teams in the NFL have begun already. And in the weeks ahead, we'll be taking a close look at your beloved Patriots and how they're progressing here in the preseason activities. One note about the Patriots, it said they have placed their 2-year receiver, Jeremiah Webb, on injured reserve, meaning he will not be eligible to play this particular season. Well, friends, with that, it pretty much brings us to the conclusion of today's broadcast of the Tuesday edition, July 28th version of the Cape Cod Times. This has been Doug Fagan, your volunteer reader, coming to you from the studios of the Audible Local Ledger here in Deer Crossing in Mashpee, Massachusetts. It's been my pleasure to read for you today, and I look forward to doing so again next Tuesday. Until then, friends, stay happy and healthy, and remember, be careful this coming week. Wednesday, tomorrow, looks like a washout, so do your errands at other times. Friday and Saturday are looking good. All right, friends, until our next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and so long for now.